6 months. That's all it takes to build a new life. Not a perfect life. Not a life without struggle. But a life that finally feels like it's yours. And yet, you've told yourself someday for how long now? You've thought about changing. You've made plans, started routines, read books. You've had mornings filled with determination and nights filled with guilt. But somehow, here you are again. Still circling the same decisions. Still negotiating with the same fears. Still living inside the same questions. Not because you're lazy. Not because you don't care. But because no one ever told you the truth. You don't change your life in one massive leap. You change it in 6 months of quiet, consistent choice. That's how long it takes to rewire your patterns. To learn how to act instead of react. To trade excuses for structure. And distraction for purpose. Not perfect, but fully. Most people live decades without ever choosing who they want to become. They respond to life. They react to circumstance. They drift through years waiting for motivation to arrive. Never realizing that discipline is the deeper fuel. And that's what these 6 months can give you. Not hype. Not temporary highs. But the muscle of self-respect. The kind that comes from keeping your word to yourself. The kind that builds day after day until one morning you wake up. And the fog is gone. And there's structure. And there's fire. And there's someone in the mirror you're finally proud to see. But it starts here. Not next year. Not when things calm down. Not after you figure everything out. It starts with a moment. This moment. Where you say, enough. Enough avoiding. Enough postponing. Enough letting fear drive your decisions. If that moment feels like it's happening now, if something in you is done waiting, then take one simple action. Subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but for the version of you that's tired of breaking promises to yourself. Because over the next few minutes, you're going to hear the kind of clarity that doesn't just inspire, it confronts. You'll be asked to look at what you're choosing every day, what you're allowing, what you're repeating, and who you're becoming as a result. And if you're willing, really willing, to show up for the next 6 months like your life depends on it, you won't just reach goals, you'll rebuild your identity. So take a breath. Forget perfect. Forget easy. Forget waiting for things to feel right. This is your moment. And it's not loud. It's quiet and decisive. Let's begin. Change sounds like a grand event, a sudden breakthrough, a lightning bolt of inspiration that turns your entire life around overnight. But real change isn't a moment. It's a direction. And it starts with one question most people never ask seriously. Who am I willing to become, and what am I willing to do about it every day for 6 months? Because the truth is, you don't need another motivational video. You need a clear decision and a structure that makes that decision live inside your daily life. Stephen Covey taught that we begin with the end in mind. But most people confuse the end with a fantasy. They imagine success, but they never define it. They say they want confidence, health, purpose, wealth, but they never clarify what those things actually look like in their daily routine. They don't ask, what time does the person I want to become wake up? How do they handle setbacks? What do they do when no one's watching? What thoughts do they entertain? What actions are non-negotiable to them? Without answers to those questions, you drift. And drifting for 6 months can cost you 6 years. But when you take time to define who you want to become, not just as an idea, but as a lived identity, everything starts to shift. You stop reacting to the day. You start responding from this. You stop asking, how do I feel today? And start asking, what would the person I'm becoming choose right now? That shift is powerful, and it's available to anyone, no matter your past, no matter your current circumstances. Because identity isn't something you inherit. It's something you build. And that building process happens in the ordinary moments, not the dramatic ones. In how you start your morning, in what you say to yourself after you make a mistake, and whether you keep the promises you whispered only to yourself. 6 months is not a shortcut. It's a sacred window, a span of time long enough to build new patterns, but short enough to keep you focused and urgent. It's not about working harder. It's about working cleaner, more intentional, more aligned, less scattered, and most of all, less reactive. You don't change your life by reacting better, by choosing better ahead of time. You choose your values. You choose your non-negotiables. You choose your routines. You choose your mindset. And when you begin choosing from identity instead of emotion, you build consistency. And consistency over 6 months compounds into character. That's the deeper transformation. Not just a new body or a better income, but a deeper sense of trust in yourself. The kind that says, I don't just want more out of life. I've become someone who creates it. So when people ask, can you really change your life in 6 months? The answer is simple. Yes, if you're not just trying to change your outcomes, but your ownership. There's a principle most people never realize until it's too late. You're always becoming someone. The question is whether you're doing it on purpose. Every day, every small decision, every unnoticed habit. They're all shaping you. But if you're not choosing those things with intention, then something else is choosing for you. Your past, your emotions, your environment, your fears. That's the difference between living a life of reaction and building a life of integrity. Most people wake up each day and respond to whatever gets their attention. Messages, pressure, appointments, distractions. They're constantly caught in what feels urgent. But they've lost touch with what's important. 6 months go by, then 6 years, and they wonder why nothing changed. But change doesn't begin with the calendar. It begins with the decision to live from the inside out. From a place of vision, not circumstance. From values, not noise. That's what it means to live with principle. It's not about being rigid. It's about being aligned. It's about defining what matters to you so clearly that everything else either fits the mission or gets removed. When you live that way, 6 months becomes powerful because you're not just changing behavior. You're building character. You start each day with a compass, not a clock. You don't just ask, what do I have to do? You ask, who am I committed to becoming today? That question changes how you move. It changes what you say yes to. It gives you clarity when life gets loud, and strength when everything feels uncertain. It's easy to look for new tools, new systems, new hacks, but what you really need is a return to core, to principle, to purpose. 6 months from now, your results won't reflect your best intentions. They'll reflect what you were truly committed to. And commitment isn't loud. It's quiet. It's invisible. It's choosing to act from vision. Even when you're tired. Even when no one is watching. Even when your emotions pull you somewhere else. That's the kind of leadership that matters most. Not leading others. Leading yourself. The person you want to become? Inside you, buried beneath layers of distraction, doubt, and delay. 6 months is not about becoming someone else. It's about returning to the version of you that already knows what matters. That version of you doesn't need motivation. They need space. They need consistency. They need boundaries. That's what this process is for. Because you don't rise to your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And systems built on principle are the only ones strong enough to hold the weight of real change. So ask yourself, am I building my next 6 months based on my values or based on my feelings? Am I structuring my days to reflect who I'm becoming? Or am I waiting for a mood that may never come? Because if you build your life on feeling, you'll always need inspiration to act. But if you build it on principle, you'll act with clarity, even in silence. And that's how transformation becomes sustainable. So tell me, what's one principle you're ready to live by starting now? Leave it in the comments, not just as an answer, but as a declaration. So where do you begin? 6 months can sound big, but it's not made of years. It's made of days. And days are made of decisions, small, silent, repeated. This journey isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters consistently, intentionally, from the inside out. Start by defining who you want to become. Write it down. Not once. Every day. Not as a wish list, but as an identity. Not, I want to be successful, but I'm becoming someone who honors time, who leads with purpose, who finishes what they start. Make it vivid. Write it like it's already true. Because the brain doesn't wait for results, it responds to repetition. And the more you see those words, the more real they become. This isn't motivation. It's identity conditioning. Then look at your day, your real day. The one filled with distractions, noise, endless choices. And ask, does this day reflect the person I'm becoming? If not, you don't need to overhaul everything. You just need to begin protecting your direction. Set boundaries. On your time. On your focus. On your energy. If your mornings are chaotic, simplify them. Wake up 30 minutes earlier. Create a routine that grounds you, not just physically, but mentally. Even 10 minutes of silence, reflection, journaling, movement, it adds up. Momentum doesn't require hours. It requires consistency. In the middle of your day, schedule one block of uninterrupted time. No phone, no multitasking. Just focus. Use it to build, to learn, to make, to follow through on that one thing you've been delaying. That hour becomes your proof that you're not just thinking, you're choosing. In the evening, before the noise winds back up, pause again. Ask yourself, did I act in alignment today? And if not, don't spiral. Just course correct. One small shift tomorrow is worth more than guilt tonight. Keep a small notebook, not for tracking perfection, but for building self-trust. Each time you do something aligned with your future self, write it down, even if it's tiny, especially if it's tiny, because small wins stack, and stacked wins build belief. Next, create space, not just in your schedule, but in your environment. Clean your physical space, digital space, mental space. Clutter, in any form, is a form of resistance. It keeps you stuck in maintenance mode. But clarity thrives in clean space, and your clarity is what will carry you through the hard days. Eliminate what no longer belongs. Apps that steal your time, voices that drained your energy, habits that mask your fear. And when the old patterns try to creep back, because they will, don't argue. Just return to the notebook, to the words, to the structure. Because discipline isn't a punishment. It's protection. Protection for your vision. Protection for your identity. Protection for the version of you that's trying to emerge, but can't do it in chaos. 6 months of this is not a sprint. It's not a grind. It's a sacred commitment, not to being perfect, but to becoming deliberate. Because when you wake up every day and move like your life matters, it starts to. Close your eyes, just for a moment. Forget what you need to do after this video. Forget what time it is. Forget who you're supposed to be in the world. Now breathe. Not the shallow breath you take when you're in a rush, but the kind that reaches all the way into the parts of you you've been ignoring. The part that's tired. The part that's disappointed. The part that's quietly wondering if this time will be any different. Because let's be honest, this isn't the first time you've thought about changing. It's not the first time you've made a plan, set a goal, visualized a new version of yourself. And yet, somewhere along the way, you faded. You got distracted. You lost rhythm. Not because you're broken. Not because you're lazy. But because somewhere, deep down, you've been negotiating with yourself. You've been choosing what's familiar over what's meaningful. You've been thinking about your future, but doubting your worthiness to step into it. You've been waiting, not for clarity, but for permission. And that's the pattern that needs to break. Not the one on your calendar, the one in your beliefs. Ask yourself, gently, what have I been carrying that doesn't belong to me anymore? What habit, what story, what old version of myself have I been protecting out of fear? What if the real reason I haven't committed is not because I don't know what to do, but because I haven't been willing to grieve who I'll have to stop being? Because growth comes with loss. Loss of excuses. Loss of comfort. Loss of identities that once kept you safe. And that's hard. That's human. But it's also the doorway. The space where clarity begins. You don't need to have it all figured out right now. You just need to be honest. Really honest. About the gap between who you say you want to be and what you're still choosing in silence. You don't have to fix that gap today. You just have to fix it. With compassion. With presence. With the kind of awareness that says, I'm no longer hiding from myself. Because that's where transformation begins. Not with a plan. Not with a strategy. But with a truth spoken quietly in the dark. A truth like, I've been drifting. I've been scared. I've been pretending this doesn't matter to me. I've been waiting for someone else to make this easier. And once you speak that truth, you stop running from yourself. You start walking with yourself. As an ally, not an enemy. That's the shift. That's the power. That's how the next 6 months can look completely different from the last. If this moment brought something real to the surface, if it cracked through the noise even just a little, go ahead and tap the like button. Not for the algorithm, but as a quiet promise. I'm ready to see myself clearly, and I'm not turning away. Something begins to shift when you stop asking, what do I need to change about my life? And start asking, who do I need to become to live the life I want? That shift isn't about motivation. It's about identity. And it's the difference between chasing goals and embodying the values that make those goals inevitable. You've spent enough time trying to force discipline through willpower alone. You've tried hacks, plans, promises, and maybe they worked for a week, maybe even a month. But long-term change never sticks until your actions are rooted in identity. Think of it this way. A person who believes they're disorganized will always sabotage structure. A person who sees themselves as inconsistent will constantly break their own momentum because their mind is loyal to who they believe they are, not who they're trying to act like. So what if the next 6 months weren't about behavior first, but about alignment? About deciding deeply who you are willing to be now, not one day, not after I fix everything. Now, because you don't become consistent by chance. You become consistent when you stop negotiating with your old identity. It's not about adding more to your day. It's about subtracting what doesn't fit the version of you you're finally ready to live as. So ask yourself honestly, what does that version of me look like, in detail? How do they walk into the morning? What do they say no to? How do they respond to setbacks? How do they protect their time? How do they speak to themselves when no one's listening? Now, start moving like that person, even if it feels awkward, even if it feels like pretending, because it's not pretending, it's training, and training builds identity, one repetition at a time. The moment you stop waiting to feel ready and start acting from who you want to be, everything begins to realign. Your priorities shift, your energy returns, your confidence rebuilds, not because you achieved a milestone, but because you honored your decision. That's the part most people miss. Confidence isn't a reward. It's a result, a byproduct of congruence. When your actions finally match your inner vision, you can build that in 6 months, not by obsessing over the outcomes, but by committing to the identity. That version of you, they exist. They're not some fantasy in the distance. They're the version of you who no longer tolerates contradiction between what they believe and what they live. And every time you act in identity, you strengthen it. You stop relying on emotion and start anchoring in values. You stop reacting and start creating. You stop needing discipline as a force and begin living it as a byproduct of clarity. This is where the shift becomes sustainable, because you're no longer pushing yourself to change. You're finally allowing yourself to be who you already knew you were. The person who keeps their word. The person who follows through. The person who doesn't need perfect conditions. Just a clear decision and a commitment to live like it matters. 6 months from now, you don't want to just say, I did a challenge. You want to say, this is who I am now. And when that happens, you'll look around at the results, the habits, the peace, the direction, and realize that the biggest win wasn't the outcome. It was that you finally became someone you trust to lead your own life. 6 months, not a miracle, not a shortcut, but a stretch of time sacred enough to build something real, something that lasts, something that looks like you, not the version others expected, but the version you were always meant to become. The decision you made here, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was powerful, because it was yours, unforced, unapologetic, unshakable. No one will clap for you when you wake up early. No one will cheer when you skip the distraction, or say no to what once numbed you, or show up even when you don't feel like it. But that's okay, because the applause isn't the goal. The alignment is. The person you're becoming doesn't need praise. They need consistency and a quiet reminder. That growth isn't something you wait for. It's something you build. Some days will feel slow. You'll feel unseen. You'll wonder if this path is really leading anywhere. But you'll keep walking, because you're no longer depending on results to validate your effort. You're depending on values. And values never run dry. You're not chasing a feeling anymore. You're creating a rhythm. And rhythms carry you through every low tide until the momentum returns. You won't be perfect, but you will be honest. And in that honesty, you'll find something most people never touch. Peace. Not because life got easy, but because you stopped hiding, stopped delaying, stopped living like your days were disposable. You chose. You returned. You committed. That's what separates change that fades from change that becomes identity. And if this journey meant something to you, if it reminded you that 6 months is enough to become someone you're proud of, then pause here and subscribe. Not for me, for you, for the next promise you're about to make, for the structure you're ready to build, for the story you're rewriting, not later now. And when you're done here, don't rush away. Don't scroll into the noise. Continue your journey of growth by watching the next video in this series. Because becoming isn't a moment, it's a direction, and you've just chosen yours.